And so first up, I want to welcome to the virtual stage uh, Raqib Naik, who is the executive director of the Center for the Study of Organized Hate. And his work is certainly work that I've been following and admiring for quite some time. And I'm so glad we're able to have this conversation. I think Rakib, I'd like for us to really just level set and really get into what is great replacement theory and how we see it spreading around the world. And I can sort of start with a definition, how I ended up defining great replacement theory in Chain of Ideas. I ended up defining it as a political theory that suggests that there are these shadowy globalist elites who are enabling peoples of color to displace the lives and livelihoods and even electoral power of, of white people who apparently need authoritarian protection. And I've found that it's actually mutated to not just a racist theory, but frankly, in different countries, wherever there is a historically disadvantaged group, that group is being presented as replacing or taking over or harming or destroying the privileged or minority group. And I've also found that these great replacement theorists principally see the solution to the Great Replacement as what they call remigration, or what in the US is this mass deportation of Black and Brown immigrants. And your organization recently did a pretty significant study on remigration. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me and for bringing all of us together from different parts of the world for this extremely important conversation. And many congratulations to you, Dr. Kendi, on your book. And one of the reasons I'm so glad that this book exists is because it gives us the language and the framework to have exactly this kind of conversation. So let me get straight into your questions. I think there are a series of questions there that I can touch upon regarding the definition. You already uh, defined it very well, and in fact, in your book, it was coined by a French white nationalist writer Renaud Camus in 2011. Claiming that it was that he called a deliberate effort by Western elites and global institutions to encourage mass migration, especially from Muslim majority countries, from Africa, from other non-European countries, to change the demographic composition of Western societies.
Yeah.
And its core emotional engine is always the same in various different contexts, whether European or American or South Asian, that your life is under threat and that you are being replaced. And of course, 2011, the term was coined, it was a fringe theory, but over the last 15 years, it has become one of the most powerful engines of hate, division, polarization, and violence of our era, and cited by perpetrators of some of the deadliest terrorist attacks in the recent history,
Yes.
including in Norway by Anders Breivik, who killed 77 people, Brenton Tarrant, who murdered 51 Muslims in Christchurch, New Zealand, Peyton Gandron in Buffalo, New York, Patrick Cruces in El Paso, Texas, who killed 23 people, mostly Mexicans, and the list goes on. And I think every single one of them young white men radicalized by the same conspiracy that white race is under threat and someone must act before it's too late.
Yeah.
Um, and you touched upon the mutation part, and here's the important thing about GRT: it's like a virus. It mutates.
Yeah.
It develops localized variants attuned to local contexts with different names in different parts of the world. And India is a great example here. My organization, we have specific projects that study India, the rise of Hindu nationalism. And these GRT style ideas existed there in different shapes and forms well before even Camus even coined the term. But
Yeah.
once that theoretical framework came into being, it gave Hindu nationalists, and this is, by the way, the ideology followed by Prime Minister Modi and his party, the BJP, a very forceful comparative ideological base to build on. And what we saw then in India was that GRT produced this whole constellation of jihad-based conspiracy theory where every active Muslim identity, culture, expression of faith, or even eating habits got reframed as a design plan to Islamize India and replace the Hindu majority.
Yeah.
And the recurring theme there is pretty much identical to the Western version, just as the claim in the West that whites are in danger in India, the claim is that Hindus are in danger.
Mm.
And this is despite the fact that India has over 1 billion Hindus and roughly 200 million Muslims, which is a ratio of 5 to 1. And even if by the time I die, it is maximum, it can go up to like 300, 350 million. It would never surpass the 1 billion number. Even if you were to bring together Bangladesh and Pakistan Muslims from there and bring it to India, they would still not be able to take it over. And of course, there are different, names that have been given to these conspiracy theories in the local context. For example, love jihad, the claim that Muslim men are deliberately targeting Hindu women for marriage to convert them to further the
Yeah.
Islamization project. Land jihad, that Muslims are strategically buying property in Hindu areas to displace Hindus, and population jihad, that Muslims are having more children to outnumber Hindus. And then there's this ever expanding constellation of other conspiracies rooted in GRT, like economic jihad, halal jihad, education jihad, drug jihad, water jihad, food jihad. It's a hell lot of different terms that they have come up with. And each one of
Yeah.
these turn some ordinary aspect of Muslim life into a grand takeover plot. And to your point on remigration, which is another term coined by Renaud Camus, who coined the term GRT, for them, GRT is the diagnosis and remigration is the prognosis of that problem.
Yeah.
And right now, here at home, the GRT has, in the US, has become a foundational pillar of Trump administration's entire and inherently racist immigration policy, and they're pushing it through remigration. Um, it's a term I'm pretty sure a lot of people must have seen it on official U.S. government social media accounts, especially
Yeah.
on DHS,
Yeah.
in the context of carrying mass deportation. And as Dr. Kendi mentioned, we recently published a report. You can find it on our website. And I must also argue that what Trump is doing in the US in the context of weaponizing this term remigration may be just the beginning. And again, India is a very clear example of where this leads. Right now, there is an active campaign of ethnic cleansing targeting roughly 30 million Bengali Muslim citizens of India. And Modi's party alleges these people as their Bangladeshi citizens, despite most of them having lived in India for generations, and accuses them of trying to replace the Hindu majority. And things have become very worse lately. The Chief Minister of India's Assam state, which is home to almost 9 million Bengali Muslim, said publicly that he cannot expel all of them at once. So he intends to create conditions that will force them to leave on their own. And he has
Mm.
already started doing that, taking away their lands, demolishing their homes, stripping them of voting rights or citizenship, and in some cases driving them to the border with Bangladesh and throwing them across. That is
Wow.
remigration, ethnic cleansing in practice right now. And in the US or European context, we may not be at the end of that path right now, but we can see where it leads.
Definitely. And it's interesting because you mentioned all the different types of jihads that these great replacement theorists have framed in India's context. It caused me to think about in the US context the way in which these great replacement theorists have positioned not only there to be a war against white people, but a war against men, a war against Christians, a war even against Christmas, a war against the family, and so all these different, particularly these identity groupings that are typically in the majority or in positions of privilege, these theorists have imagined that they're under threat. And the reason for this in the US and certainly in other countries is because when you can make a group of people believe that they are under threat, that people are coming to take over, that their lives are potentially or livelihoods are being lost, then you can present yourself as their protector. You can present yourself as their savior. And then you can also justify increasingly militarizing and police, creating a policed state, which then becomes obviously the throughway to authoritarianism. And so you build an authoritarian state through getting people to consent to their own domination on the pretext that they need you to save them. And that's how great replacement theory, as I try to show in Chain of Ideas, becomes this animating feature of authoritarianism. And so, one last question in terms of your work. How are you seeing specifically Modi's administration using great replacement theory to uh, create a more authoritarian state?
Right. So I think I already mentioned one aspect of it, that is the ongoing ethnic cleansing targeting the Bengali origin Muslims in India who are Indian citizens. But these different GRT linked conspiracy theories are the foundational drivers of the ongoing hate, violence, and the broader state-led persecution of Muslim minorities in the country. And as you mentioned, the risk, the harms of GRT with respect to its mobilizing power, extreme. I mean, it's very powerful, very impactful because when you make someone believe that their entire existence, their family's future, their children's safety, their community survival is under threat,
Yeah,
that person is definitely going to do anything in their power, including using violence to stop it.
yeah,
And that is how exactly GRT has turned neighbors against neighbors in India and of course in rest of the world. Um, and um, and one of the harms of the GRT, as you rightly touched upon, is how it hollows out the democracy and ushers in this new unflinching era of authoritarianisms because GRT propels hate and hate leads to polarization and polarization leads to violence and that violence feeds more polarization and
yeah,
that cycle is exactly the lifeblood of authoritarian leaders who use it both to sail to power and to maintain it.
yeah,
And we are right now watching it work in India, that has been under Modi's under rule for almost 12 years now, across Europe, across Latin America, and other parts of Asia, where for parties like Modi's and authoritarian leaders are riding this cycle straight to power and running on this same GRT playbook of demographic fear, panic, and scapegoating of minorities. And the organization we run, one of the projects called India Hate Lab, over the last 3 years, we started documenting hate speeches delivered at in-person events. And the first year, we documented 668 hate speeches at in-person events, and out of that more than half referenced these GRT-linked conspiracy theories.
wow,
In
wow,
2024, that number jumped up to over 1,100 hate speeches at in-person events. I'm talking about these events that are attended by tens of thousands of
wow,
people, in some
wow.
cases hundreds of thousands of people, if a politician like Modi is going to speak at those rallies. And then in
Mm,
2025, the number jumped up to almost 1,300 hate speech events that
wow,
include dangerous speeches, including calls for outright violence against Muslims and Christians. And in 2025, over 65% of hate speeches reference one of these GRT linked theories and added an action component to it by calling on people to commit acts of violence to uproot this Muslim problem from the country. So
Yes.
what we are actually witnessing on the ground is this dangerous climate of fear and persecution that is propelling, of course, this regime's entrenchment in power, but also the ongoing persecution of religious minorities in the country.
Wow. Well, Raqib, I just want to thank you again for your work, documenting those hate speeches and crimes and frankly, hate more broadly in India and around the world. Thank you again for joining us. Of course, everyone, please, if you haven't already, follow the Center for the Study of Organized Hate. It's one of the best places you can get up-to-date analysis and research and how to take action, against precisely what we're talking about today. So thank you so much, Raqib.